Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to the Q&A session for Assessment 2 Folio. Thank you also for our wonderful ELAs in the chat room. We have Erin, Karen, and Carolyn. So welcome to your ELAs. They will be manning the chat for you guys as we go. And they might also jump on the microphone if they feel the need at any point. All right. Now, I'm really sorry, first up, that this sound wasn't working on the Flipped Collaborate at first. It was resolved, but it may mean that you might have only had a couple of days to have a look at it. If not, don't worry. We'll try to make everything as self-explanatory as possible in this session tonight, and you can always go back and have a look at the Flipped Collaborate for some more information. Just checking again, everybody can hear me okay? Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. All right. We're going to try to make this session as interactive as possible. So the idea of the Flipped Collaborate is that it gives you most of the information for the session, and then our Q&A session really is a chance for you to ask all those questions and for us to have a look at some practical examples as well. Okay, so the first thing that I thought would be good to start with is the actual format of your folio, or how it looks, because I know some people are a little bit confused about that. So basically there are 4 scenarios, and you present each of those 4 scenarios separately. So these are the headings that you would include. So you would first of all put your scenario, for example, scenario 1 from week 3, the topic, for example, relationship with self. Then you would state what your resource is. You can include an image if you like. This is not compulsory, but we as ELAs find it helpful. You would then give a short description of your resource and make it clear where you got your resource from, where you sourced it. You may have invented it yourself, which is fine, and you can just mention that. There is the rationale that supports your reasoning for the resource, and then a reference list. So you would actually do this 4 times, which means there would be 4 reference lists, 1 for each of the scenarios. Does that all make sense? Is that clear? Any questions about the format? All good? Thumbs up is good. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So this is really a collation of resources. It's not an essay or anything like that. It's very, very much a portfolio. Excellent. Okay, I thought we might start with looking at some definitions. What is a resource, for example? Who would like to have a go in the chat box, or you could grab the microphone if you like, and try to help us understand what a resource is. I know that might seem obvious, but sometimes we can get confused with you know, what constitutes a resource. So let's have a go. Who'd like to have a go at defining a resource in the chat box? Don't all rush at once. Okay, well, I'm going to have a bit of a go. I personally see a resource as anything really that a teacher can use to support student learning, or the student themselves can use to support their own learning, or a teacher can use with their student to support learning. So it's basically anything that you can use. So it could actually be a policy, although I wouldn't probably go that way if I were you. I would try to stick to a tool that is something that is usable, that can actually be put into practice, that you can actually apply to the learning or to the classroom. So let's have some examples. I've already got some going here. Some interactive games on the whiteboard. It could be a set of activities, a poster. Yeah. STEM activities, a video. Yes, great. Yep, as Carolyn's saying here, think about how your resource might support behaviour. Flashcards, fantastic. A website or even an activity on a website could be a resource. Any kind of an app, an iPad app or some other kind of app. A graph or a journal. Any more ideas? Yeah. Books, a quality resource. Does a group activity count? Jordan, yeah, I think it could do, as long as you're very specific and clear on what the activity included. I don't know if a discussion would be a resource unless there is something that you've got a resource that actually promotes the discussion. I think it just yeah, look, I see what you mean. A group activity that includes a discussion. Yeah, I think we just have to be a little bit careful of it not being too broad or too vague. It does specifically need, it really needs to be something that a teacher can pick up and use quite specifically to address particular learning or behaviour management. A resource is an artifact which assists or supplements something. Yeah, that's a good definition. A strategy that uses group activities to help the student. I tend to see the strategy as a way of using the resource or a way of applying it. So a strategy is a teaching method or a way of teaching. Yeah, it's more like the management of the resource, how you would actually put it into practice. PDFs from appropriate sources, yeah. Yeah, I think depends what are on the PDFs, I guess. But yes, it could be something like, it could be a document of some kind. I think I said in the initial Flip to Collaborate, just be very wary of resources that might be a little bit light on, not have enough depth in them. So things that I'm thinking of are things like sticker charts or a list of rules. Yeah, avoid quick fix solutions. You need to have a resource that's going to be able to enable you to be able to develop a strong rationale around the teaching and learning benefits of that resource. If you make it something very simplistic, like a sticker chart, you're also going to have it's going to be harder to find theory to support those types of resources. Yeah, a resource should be something tangible, physical or web-based is good. Yeah. Okay, are we good on the resources? If you have a look at the actual extended PowerPoint that I posted in the announcement, there are some more examples of resources there as well. And the other good thing about this activity is that you are really welcome to post your idea for your resources in your discussions. So it's quite fine for your ELA to come on board and go, yes, I think that's a really great resource that's got a lot of room for exploration. It can give you some depth in your discussion, or they might say, they might actually advise you against a resource that you've chosen because it might not give you enough opportunity to create a depth of discussion. So do feel free to post your resources to your discussions, and your ELAs are more than happy to give you feedback on your choices. Okay, Another definition we've got here is what is a rationale. I'm not sure if you really need to know the definition of a rationale, but I thought I'd put it in there just in case. Do we all know what a rationale is? What does that mean? Does anybody want to have a go at that in the chat box? Oh, Jordan's going to go on the mic. Excellent. Go, Jordan.
Hi. Yeah, I'm not big on typing. I've done enough recently, so I thought I'd give this a go. Yeah, just basically the reason for using a resource and the theory behind it, why you would use it and why you think it's effective, maybe.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Jordan. Perfect. It's an explanation, isn't it? It's an explanation for the choice that you've made. Thanks very much for going on the speaker too. You know, what are the principles that you're applying, your opinions, your beliefs around your choice? So obviously, you know, your rationale has to justify why you've chosen the resource in terms of how is it going to support the behaviour and how is the pedagogy that you are using to implement that resource, how is that going to be effective in preventing a particular behaviour or supporting it going forward. So thank you. Excellent. All right, here's a bit of a tricky one. What is a framework? And we've got what is a policy as well. These two things do get a little bit mixed up sometimes, and with good reason. So what do we mean by a framework? Anybody else feeling brave? Want to go on the microphone? Yep. Catherine, curriculum or teaching standard is a good example of a framework. Steps to follow. Yeah. That's all right. All good, Kimberly. It's an organised plan or a set of standards. In education, it can certainly be a set of learning outcomes that defines the content to be learned. So, you know, it can be a framework that is set up for outcome-based education. Its framework is really a structure around what it is that you are teaching, or it could be around behaviour management even. You could have a framework in your school around behaviour management, although that's more likely to be a policy. Let's have some examples of a framework. Catherine's already said curriculum or teaching standards. Kimberly, when we are referencing policy, framework, etc., as a discussion point, are we referencing how the resource connects? Yes, definitely. It's part of your rationale. It's what the reasons that you're giving to support your resource. Absolutely. I mean, it could be that you use a framework or a policy as a resource, although I wouldn't probably choose that to go down that track. I think that's trickier, but it is possible that you could use it as a resource. Let's have some examples of a framework. We've had the Australian curriculum. Code of ethics could be a framework, absolutely. Yes, exactly, Jacqueline. You could say your resource is supported by the Australian curriculum, or your reason for using the resource is because of the advice in the Australian curriculum. Standardised testing like NAPLAN. Yeah, I guess there's a framework around that. There's the National Quality Framework. There is, in Victoria, the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes. There's a national framework for values education in Australian schools, although this could also be seen as a policy. Definitely the early learning years framework, Michelle, excellent. Professional practice framework, yes, yeah, exactly, Karen. They also could cross over the line into being a policy as well. And I don't think that we're going to, as you know, when we're marking, we're not going to get too hung up on whether, you know, the main thing is that you're referring to important documents. We're not going to get too hung up on the terminology of, you know, is the professional practice or the professional standards for teachers, is that a framework or is it a policy? It could be considered both. So we're not going to get too hung up on those sorts of definitions. But what is the definition? Like, what would be the difference with a policy? How does a policy differ from a framework? Where are you likely to see a policy? Okay, well, I'll get you started. In a school, thanks, Michelle. Excellent. They're often, or all schools have policies. They have policies for everything. Government policies, exactly. In a workplace, thank you, Natasha. So policies tend to be enforceable documents, documents that are expected to be followed in a particular place, whether it's school or work. Some examples. I'll start off. There's the Smarter Schools National Partnership for Low Socioeconomic Status School Communities. That's a policy. That's an education policy, actually. There's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Education Action Plan. That's a policy. Can anyone else think of any other policies offhand? Yeah, a social media policy, which would probably exist in a school. Perfect. Often schools have behaviour policies as well. What actually, you know, is the expected standards of behaviour and, yeah, codes of conduct. Fantastic. And there's often actions that go with these policies as well. Health and safety. Brilliant. All right, I think you guys have got it. You have got this. Yes, Amy, it could be an existing policy. I would hope that any policy you use is a policy that is available publicly. Quite often school websites actually post their policies. So, you know, if they're on a website and they're public, then there should be no reason why you can't use them. Fantastic, Amy. Yep, that's great. Carolyn's got some good examples there. Brilliant. Yeah, I know. She's the link queen tonight, Carolyn. Fantastic. All right. Before we move on, are there any other definitions in your assessment information sheet that you feel like we need to cover? Are there any terms that are confusing or? No? All right. Well, if you think of any later on, don't be afraid to just put it into the chat. Oh, preventative. Okay, thanks, Carolyn. That's a good one. Okay, what do we mean by preventative? So, first of all, I think the whole approach to learning about behaviour management in this unit is very much about being preventative rather than reactive. So it's moving away from you know, once the behaviour is already in place, looking at trying to manage that or trying to, you know, even punish that behaviour. It's trying to actually prevent behaviour or challenging behaviour from occurring in the first place. Obviously, it's a lot easier for teachers to be able to prevent behaviour or poor behaviour than to try and manage it after the fact. But it also can mean that if there's already some just, you know, worrying behaviours or the beginnings of some worrying behaviours, that putting in a certain resource or a strategy or a teaching model can actually prevent it from escalating further. Okay, hopefully that helps. But I think someone has their hand up. Jordan, was it? Feel free to take the microphone. Is it Jordan? Or Adam? Adam.
Yes. So I'm actually looking now at the assessment page with the overview and the details and the scenarios. What I'm looking at is it basically tells me that I'm making a folio and that I will then write 500 words on each scenario. So what I'm wondering from this is It says I don't necessarily have to write this myself. That's really strange to me. So I can find a 500 word document online, and that's my assignment. I'm really not sure about what's required here.
Okay. So no, you definitely can't just find a pre-written rationale and include that. It definitely needs to be your own rationale that you have written. And it's just like any other kind of research assignment. You'll actually gather up all of your information and your reading, and it needs to be your own rationale that you've developed based on the research that you've done. So I'm not really quite sure where you read that bit, Adam. Can you read that actual line out, that where you think that it's saying you can get your source from somewhere else?
Yeah, it's saying to create or find a resource, is it not? Find or create 4 folio resources in response to the scenarios.
Okay, I understand what you mean now. All right, so what that means is, yeah, so that's the resource, not the rationale. So let's just say you wanted to create your own game cards, rather than going out and finding some game cards that already exist. You might decide that you want to create your own game cards because they will be much more suitable to the child or to the scenario. But then your whole rationale about why you created those game cards or how you created them needs to be fully supported by research.
Okay, so we have a resource that we are applying to each scenario, but we then write a 500-word piece in response to the resource and other resources that we have read.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just to the one choice of resource. So for each scenario, you choose one resource, and for each scenario, you then need to provide your rationale as to why you either chose that resource or why you created it yourself.
Right. So it's we're creating something or finding something to apply to each scenario, and then we write a approximately 500-word piece on each scenario / resource and why they work well together, why that's the solution or why that's going to work.
Exactly. Correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for asking the question. I'm glad you asked it. I would hate for that confusion to go across into people's assessments. So great question. Thank you.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So that's fine. And the other point there is that it is also an option to find a resource that exists and to modify it slightly to suit your scenario or to suit that child that you're supporting. So that's a good option as well, because it means that you can really cater to the child by making those modifications to the resource. Okay, Erica, I was wondering, since the references are split for each scenario, will that be included in the word count? Okay, so the reference list is never included in your word count. So that goes for any assignment that you do at Swinburne. The actual reference list is never included, but everything else is. So the 500 words definitely includes the rationale. If you're going to include the description of the scenario, we won't count those words. But you actually don't really need to. As long as you've got the heading and the topic and the week that we are referring to, you don't need to include the scenario. But yes, the resource description will be included in your word count. So I wouldn't go into too much detail about your resource description. Obviously, we need to understand what it is and what it does, but then you need to put the bulk of your words into your rationale. Yeah, so the resource and the rationale is 500 words plus or minus 10%. I would be using all of your 500 words. If you go under that, you're going to find it hard to cover the criteria. It is a very tight word count, so you're going to have to, as usual, write succinctly on this. So make all those words count. Make sure those words are, directly addressing the criteria. You will be referring to a theory to describe the behavior, but you don't need to go into that in anywhere near as much detail as you did with your first assessment. So I would be brief on the resource description, a little bit brief on describing the behavior and the theory that you've used to describe the behavior, and put the bulk of your word count into your rationale. That is the reasonings behind your choice of resource and how you think it will be effective in supporting that behavior. Are you referencing teaching pedagogy theory? Yes, absolutely. Okay, we are going to have a little bit of a crack at a few of these examples in practice. So let's just say we're looking at scenario 1 from week 3. The topic is relationship with self. It's really important that you take notice of that topic, because that is what is going to guide you in choosing your resource. So let's go through some steps that will help you work through this scenario. So if you remember, Jared is a 7-year-old boy who is having difficulty with his reading. So what are the behaviours, very briefly, that you can see in this scenario? This is a little bit like what you did with assessment 1, identify the behaviours. He's upset, yeah. Yeah, more behaviours. Avoidance, great. Lack of self-confidence, worried. Yeah, low self-esteem could be the reason, not as much the behaviour. Frustration, embarrassed, withdrawal. Yeah. Definitely avoiding reading, not progressing. He's also reading at a slow pace. He's stumbling over his words. Okay, so we've got the behaviour. What might be a theory that we could use to explain this behaviour? Again, it's something that you won't go into a lot of detail, but just any of the behaviour theories that you have learned about so far, what could you use to explain this? Yeah, definitely. Cognitive theory. Maybe he's not ready. Yeah, developmental, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Okay, I mean, there could be other theories as well, but we'll go with that one. That's pretty good. Yep, Maslow's hierarchy definitely could apply to this. But again, as I said, we wouldn't be going into a great deal of detail on this. You only have 500 words. But yep, some explanation on why he's, why he's possibly having these issues with self-confidence. And then we will consider some resources. So you'll have a think about what could possibly support Jared as a resource. Do you want to have a go at that now? Let's throw some ideas around. Obviously, there's way more than one solution. Melody, I would just I wouldn't bother going into a lot of detail explaining the actual theory itself. I would just say, according to, Maslow's theory, it's possible that Jared, hasn't reached the self-actualization stage. He's not developed at that level yet, therefore his self-esteem is suffering. I wouldn't go into giving a full description of the theory itself, no, because I don't think you have the word count to play with. Yeah, an app with basic phonics and reading to practice flashcards to take home. An interactive spelling game. Yeah. Explore the learning style to support. Yeah. Okay. These are all great tools. I guess with this one, it's really important to keep in mind the topic, which is relationship with self. So although these resources that particularly support reading are great and possibly would help him, you will still need, if you're going to use those types of resources, you'll still need to justify how his self-esteem will develop and grow through using this resource. Buddy reading could be a good one as well. Developing confidence through that. Remember, you need to keep coming back to that relationship with self as your reasoning and your rationale for the choice of your resource. It might be a resource that has nothing to do with reading. It might be all about developing his self-esteem. It could be an observational chart, which is an example that I've got here, where the teacher observes his behaviour in class. Maybe the teacher involves a parent in working with that observational chart and asks perhaps what is going on at home, that if there are any similar sorts of behaviours at home, and looking at really, supporting him holistically, and the observational chart itself is the resource, Jacqueline, but the way that you would implement that chart and the way you would use it with the teacher, so with the parent and with the child, all those actions are strategies, but the actual resource is the chart itself, the observational chart. So just be very, very careful with this particular scenario, that that your reasoning and your rationale is focused on building self-esteem, and it could be self-esteem as a reader, or it could just be self-esteem in general, and that's where the your sociocultural theory comes in as well, because you might be considering what's going on at home or what's going on with his peers even. There may be some issues with his peers and he feels too embarrassed to read aloud or read in front of them. So yeah, hopefully, is that all good with everybody? Yeah, great. Okay, scenario 2. Okay, so this one is relationships with others. Let's quickly have a look at some behaviours. This one is Janine. She's having some troubles at home and she's starting to boss everyone around in class. So very quickly, what are the behaviours in here that we see? Controlling, yep. Being bossy, yeah. Authoritarian, yeah. Aggressive, anger, yelling, frustrated, yeah. She also doesn't want to go to school. That's sort of some behaviours there as well. Hurt, definitely. Okay, a link to theory here. What would be a good theory to link with to explain this behaviour? Attachment theory. Okay, that's a good one. Behaviourism, yeah. Bronfenbrenner, yeah. Ecological, perfect. All right, so it's definitely looking at the different systems of Bronfenbrenner, because she's got some issues with home and school and an interrelationship there between those as well. Perfect. Okay, some possible resources to support her. Ideas? Mediation, yeah. Yeah, mediation counselling. I'm not sure. I mean, counselling probably is something that would be good for her, and mediation might be too. I'm just not sure that it's a resource. It definitely is something that could be part, like a strategy that's part of a resource. Feelings app, yep. Education triggers of anger, yep. Okay. Classwork on families and change, mindfulness sessions, yep. I'm going to suggest that you have a look at the Bullying No Way website. There's a, thank you, Kimberly, yep, restorative practice. There are a lot of activities on the Bullying No Way website, but I don't want to suggest that Janine is in fact a bully. In fact, I don't think Janine is a bully. Her behaviour could definitely lead to bullying if it's not prevented. Yes, exactly, Jacqueline. It's, you know, there's the potential there for her behaviour to become bullying, especially if she starts to victimize, you know, one or two particular children. But at this stage, I think we're looking at preventative measures. And if you have a look at the bullying website, there are a lot of resources on there. There are a lot of activities that can be used to explore feelings, to develop positive, strong relationships with other children, to find activities where children can relate positively and self-manage behaviour. So really having a look at, you know, getting down to how Janine can start to be proactive in managing her own feelings and improving her own relationships with other people. And there's also restorative practices, which we've put there as an example, that could also be quite good as well. Okay. So Melody, yeah, just well, we've given you a couple there. The anti-bullying or any kind of bullying website will have preventative activities to do with supporting relationships. This restorative practices is another good one. Just we're basically looking for any kinds of resources that are all about children exploring feelings. Yeah, thanks, Karen. Emotional intelligence resources, how to manage socially as well. Okay, Erin's put another example there, the practice of bibliotherapy. In this instance, CBT would not be a resource. Cognitive behaviour therapy, Adam. No, because I think that's I think that would be a referral to a service, and what we really want to make sure is that your resource is something a teacher can actually use and implement, not referring them to an outside organisation. We don't want anything. Yeah. Oh, if you can show a program that a teacher can take on, if you've got a program that a teacher can take on, or a model that a teacher can take on, it's a possibility. Yeah, it is kind of starting to go into like some fairly serious psychology. But yeah, if you've got a simplified program that you've got access to, do you, Adam, that a teacher can utilize? Yeah. Okay. Adam, it might be a good idea if you're intending on that. I'm not ruling it out completely. If it's something that's usable by a teacher, and it could support a child in improving behaviour, then it's possible, it's usable. But I would send that to your ELA and get them to have a close look at it. You know, I guess we're trying to use resources as well, that we do also need to consider that it's not just one child that we're working with, that any activities or resources that you bring into the classroom will have either a direct or an indirect impact on the whole class. So we do have to consider the child within the class as well. Yeah. Behavior consequences. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure, Adam. It's I'm not sure how preventative that might be. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It feels a little bit out of the scope to me, but do send it through and we'll have a look at it. Yeah, we have to make sure that we're keeping within the capabilities of the teacher, and sort of not going into, you know, more the psychology or psychologist side of things. But definitely not closed-minded to it. If we could have a look at it, that would be good. Cool. And remember, you've only got 500 words. That's the other thing. So although we don't want it to be really simplistic, we don't want it to be so complex that you can't cover it in 500 words. Yes, Melody, you can use any of these examples that we're sharing. Yeah. Yeah, like Erin's saying, it should be something that the majority of teachers could use with ease. Exactly. All right, we shall move along. I might just whip through this one just so that we've got time for other questions. This one is Kurt and a 10-year-old boy who's in an isolated community and he's not completing his tasks. And the topic is relationship with curriculum. So again, you would identify behaviours, link to theory, and then look at some possible resources. So we're looking at relationship with curriculum here. We've got a child who is not motivated or not engaged with his learning. There are just so many different resources you could draw upon. I did put an example here of a professional online teacher community, just because I wanted to give an example of a resource that could actually be for the teacher, and in this case the teacher to skill themselves up to be able to support the child. So, you know, in this case the school is in an isolated community. They don't have much in the way of resources, so it could be that the teacher joins some kind of an online teacher community, and you know, they learn through being part of this community. They learn about project-based learning, or they learn new pedagogies for deep learning. They could learn a little bit more about inquiry learning. But all of these, any resource that you choose, it could be one that's just for Kurt here, is obviously going to need to be about the student, Kurt, at the centre of the learning, and about Kurt having much more choice and much more voice in his learning. So does anyone want to throw in some quick examples of some resources that might be good for Kurt or for Kurt's teacher? No ideas? Yep, project-based learning. Thanks, Karen. Catering to his interests. Try to look for a particular model of project-based learning. Teachers can use ABA. CBT is talking about ABA. Sorry, what do you mean by ABA, Adam? I'm having a blank spot. Yeah, anything to do with gifted learning, Michelle. There's lots of resources about or for gifted learners. Oh, advanced behaviour analysis. I don't know, Adam. How is that going to help Kurt with his learning in this case? I think we really need to, because this is about relationship with the curriculum, we need to be focused on a particular method or model of learning that's going to assist Kurt and engage him with his learning. Yep. Any kind of inquiry-based learning model could be useful. Yeah, so inquiry learning is an approach to teaching. It's a teaching model, Kimberly. There's lots and lots of different types of inquiry learning models out there. So I would, rather than just talking about inquiry learning generally, I would look for a particular model of inquiry learning and use that as a resource. Yeah, so a model would be specific enough. Yeah. And then, of course, you'll need to justify why, you know, why that is going to support Kurt. Mentoring program, yeah. I think it also, another thing to consider here with Kurt is the community that he's from as well. So maybe like tapping into his interests might be, might also tap into his Indigenous background, potentially. Like really trying to get to understand what it is that drives Kurt, and, you know, what it is that's going to give him the passion for learning, and then giving him the tools and the capabilities to be able to lead his own learning. Would that be a PD, professional development? It could be, yeah. It definitely could be. But again, you'll need to specifically say what that professional development is, not just PD in general. Yeah, cool. All right, good one. All right. Okay, I think that's, hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea with the scenarios. I did talk about the rubric a bit in the flipped collaborate, but let's just have a look at a few parts of the rubric. As you all know from last time, with the holistic rubric, you need to meet the criteria at each level to actually receive that mark. So to get a pass, you will need to cover all of these 4 dot points that are on this pass rubric. One of the things that I want to point out here particularly is dot point 2. It does say each item discusses principles, policy and practice in relation to the scenario and behaviour analysis. I just want to say that as long as you are covering principles, policy and practice across the whole folio, you can still pass. We have discussed this in the past with other ELAs, and we realised that 500 words is not very much to be able to include a principle, a policy and a practice for every scenario. So as long as you are including a principle, policy or practice in each scenario, that'll be fine. Okay, so any questions about that? Is that clear enough? Okay, so in order to gain a pass, each item must have a descriptive rationale that discusses how the resource can be related to supporting and understanding the behaviour, and specific examples related to preventative models are included. Practicing, yeah, that actually refers to what it is the teacher is actually doing in the classroom. So you've got the theory and then you've got the actual practice. So what actually happens in the classroom. So your pedagogy is actually your theory. Your pedagogy is the principles of teaching and learning. And then when you put that into practice, when you actually enact those principles in the classroom, that is your practice. Cool. Okay, so you need to draw on an appropriate range of sources. So again, this needs to be referenced throughout, and the written expression needs to be at postgraduate university level. Okay, any questions about the pass level of the rubric? No. Preventative psychology, yes, it definitely can mean to stop the situations from worsening or escalating. Absolutely. Yep. Okay, the credit level, I think I'll just get you to have a look at that and throw any questions. Thanks, Erin, for reminding me of that. This whole folio is to be written in third person, definitely, not first person. Do we all know what we mean by third person? Yeah, so there's no we, I, me, us. Yeah, it's also not a good idea to ask the reader questions, to ask rhetorical questions, because that's actually making it quite personal as well. So try to avoid asking a question in your assignment. Yeah, exactly. That's right, Adam. Thank you. Perfect example. All right, I'm going to move past this credit level unless anyone has a particular question about this. The distinction level, you can see that a wide range of resources is expected at the distinction level. So if you've just got, your rationale's only got 1 or 2 resources, then you might struggle to reach this higher level of the rubric. Okay, any questions about the distinction? Please just make sure you do come back to the rubric and read it very carefully. How many would you suggest in 500 words? Oh, how many ideas do you have? Thanks, Adam. How long is a piece of string? How many claims do you have to support? So, whenever you make a claim or a statement, it can't just be personal opinion, unfortunately. It's got to be based on something that you've read. And so it needs to be referenced. Otherwise, we don't know if you're just making it up in your head or if you've actually got a source of information that you have found this from. It also pays to have a variety of sources. If I read a paragraph or even 2 paragraphs and it's all from the same source, then I don't know, I may as well have just read the source. What we want is a balance. Critical thinking is about finding, various sources and comparing them and contrasting them and finding one resource that supports another resource, source, I should say, not resource. Don't want to confuse you, but one source of information, and then you find another source of information that says the same thing, then your argument becomes stronger. But definitely you should be paraphrasing, as Carolyn has just said, in your own words as much as possible. So you find your information from your sources, put them in your own words and reference them. Yeah, be careful about using big chunks of direct quotations. It can take up a lot of word count. And what we're really looking for is for you to demonstrate your understanding. In other assessments, we are asked to write our own personal reflections and views on a topic. You're really asked to demonstrate your understanding in these assessments. Yeah, we're not really looking for personal views and reflections in these types of assessments, actually. Yeah. Yeah, any statement or claim that you make needs to be paraphrased and referenced, exactly. Yeah, I understand, Catherine. It's tricky when you're writing different assessments for different purposes. It's almost scientific what we're doing here. We're using theory to analyze behavior, and then we're matching that with resources. Yeah, it is a little bit scientific, Adam. Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. Any other general questions that you'd like to throw at us? Oh, this is a good sign. Not many questions. Yeah, all good, Jordan. I will say with this unit, there's a little bit of a trick and a bit of an art to learning how to analyze and discuss behavior with theory. And we have found in the past that the first assessment is the trickiest. Hopefully with this second one, you'll be into a little bit more of a groove and you'll find it a little bit easier. Can we get a PDF assignment sheet to go with the web-based stuff? Oh, you can actually download, you can print those straight off, Adam. So if you go to the assessment information sheet up the top where it says print, if you just click on print, and then you should have the option to save it as a PDF. For all units. I can't speak for other units, Adam, sorry, but I do know that, yeah, certainly in Canvas, all those information sheets are printable. Yeah, at the top right hand corner, there's a little print button. Just click on that, press print, and then save it as a PDF. All right, well, it sounds like you guys all know what you're doing, so that's fantastic. Unless there's any further questions, we'll sign off, I think. So Helen, there's no particular number of, no, it's one resource per scenario, one resource. Multiple sources of information. Sorry if that confused you. So it's one resource per scenario, but I was talking about sources of information. So you're referencing your research. You need to obviously find more than 2 per scenario. So you need to have a range of oh, there I go again, a range of sources. Yeah. All right, cool. Adam's got his Facebook page up there. I'm pretty sure there's some actual Facebook groups for Swinburne. If you have a little look around, you might find them. We tend to stay out of that stuff a bit, but yeah, I'm sure there'll be support groups in Facebook that you can join. Okay. So Erica, there's a flipped collaborate to listen to as well. That you'll find that in the unit announcements. So make sure you're always checking the unit announcements. That's where we put a lot of our resources. And I will definitely make the recording of this session available tomorrow. Thank you very much to our wonderful ELAs for coming and for helping out with the chat. They did an amazing job. And thank everybody for coming along today. Sorry, I don't have any updates on the Canvas app. Sorry, Adam. As soon as we do, we'll let you know. Thanks so much for coming. Good luck with the assessment, everybody. And that was 1 hour, exactly. Thanks, Erica. All right, I'll turn it off.